And you ready to go?
I am ready.
You guys? Yeah or no? Yeah? All right, let's call the meeting to order. If you all would rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Roll call, Paula?
Commissioner Corey,
Here?
Commissioner DePaul,
Here.
Commissioner Dempster,
Here.
Commissioner Kovacevic,
Here.
Commissioner Schlossberg,
Here.
Vice Chair Watts, Chair Gray.
Here, thank you, Paula. Call to the public. Paula, any speaker cards?
No, Chairman.
Thank you, Paula. Agenda item 4, consideration of possible action on the March 11th meeting minutes. Commissioners, comments or a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Watts for the record, seconded by Commissioner Corey. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain on that. I wasn't present last month, so just for the record, I'm abstaining.
Okay,
Thank you, Commissioner.
6-0.
You didn't watch the video? It's your first offense. All right, agenda item 5, consideration of preliminary plat for 3 acres at the northeast corner of Palisades in La Montana, subdividing 3 currently commercial zone parcels into 4 lots. Case number 1. It's a new case format.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Good evening. As you said, Mr. Chairman, what you have before you is a proposal for a preliminary plat. The subject property is at the northeast corner of Palisades in La Montana, just up the street here. Currently, there are 3 commercial parcels. It's zoned intermediate commercial. Currently the home for Honor Health, Southwest Designs, and Dutch Bros. Also the former home of the Agent Fang restaurant, which sits vacant, and 1 undeveloped pad. The request, again, is to convert these 3 commercial lots to a 4-lot commercial subdivision. This is a detail of the preliminary plat that you have in your packet. And in the following slide, I kind of quite simply prepared a side-by-side comparison of the lot lines and how they will be adjusted, assuming approval of the preliminary plat or ultimately the final plat. So what you see here again is 3 lots being converted to a 4-lot subdivision. The proposed lot number 3, as you can see here on these 2 in these 2 illustrations here, the lot line is being adjusted slightly by moving to the west a little bit, and a new lot will be created for the Dutch Bros coffee shop as well. A while back, the parking lot was originally a 45 degree angle parking lot configuration. That has since been converted to a 90-degree configuration. And also I should mention that buildings 1 and 2 here used to be connected by a few other units. That has since been demolished, and in its place some additional parking has been provided. And parking is actually more than adequate for this center. So staff's recommendation is approval of the preliminary plat. One thing that staff will require prior to final plat approval, which would go directly to town council, is a shared parking agreement among the owners of the 4 lots. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation. I'll open up to questions.
Commissioners? Commissioner Corey.
Yeah, Chair Farhad, can you just go back to that image real quick? And just to clarify, the Lot 1 and Lot 4 are still, the parking is still connected there,
Correct.
correct? So you can still drive through those without the line?
Correct.
Okay,
It's one
then-
contiguous parking lot.
okay. And then it looks like Lot 3 is also extending to the south a little bit, is that true?
Lot 3, maybe, yeah, actually, it looks like it's slightly extending to the south, a little bit. And Lot 3 is actually, I should mention, where I mentioned would be the vacant pad.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kovacevic?
The parking, I can tell what parking goes with Lot 1, but the rest of that parking field, is that with Lot 2, 3, or 4? Yeah, that's where your cursor is. That parking. Is that part of 4?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, that is for Lot 4.
And Dutch Brothers do they even have any seating?
Little.
Yeah, but I mean, not 20 spots worth.
No, certainly not that much, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner. I think they just have seating underneath the
Yeah,
patio cover there.
okay. I'm curious as to why they didn't put the parking with Lot 2. Because I mean, there are a lot of owners, triple net owners that would love to have that Dutch Brothers. And the center owner would want to, I would think, want to keep the parking if they were going to sell off the Dutch Brothers. I mean, that's obviously not their intent, but I just want to point out it doesn't, I mean, I don't have a problem with it, it's their property, but that's not how I would do it.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I could only speculate, maybe for tax purposes, property tax. But otherwise, I don't have a good answer.
Well, I think there's also the, opportunity cost of what if it's not Dutch Brothers? Then it'd be really difficult to park that parcel if that went into a revitalization. The other, I guess, insider caveat that makes this interesting to me is Lot 1, every space that's associated with Lot 1 is tied up in the lease with Lot 1. So it's not really even subjectable to a shared parking agreement. So I question whether the site balances after that. Commissioner? Excuse me.
Farhad, it really doesn't look like there's dramatic changes being made, but is it in anticipation of something in the future that you may be privy to at this point?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I have not received any inquiries about any interest in any additional businesses wanting to locate there. The only thing worth noting, as far as I'm concerned, is Lot 3 and the fact that there's a vacant pad there certainly has potential to be developed soon, but I haven't received any inquiries about any additional businesses wanting to locate there anytime soon, at least.
So these three owners got together and just decided that they're going to make it 4 instead of 3?
Correct. It's one owner.
It is one owner now?
The whole plaza is one owner who's parceling off to flip individual pads.
Okay,
It's going the other way.
interesting. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dempster, any thoughts?
Well, I guess with the other questions, now I'm confused because I thought that for the final approval, it's based upon a requirement for shared parking. So the proposed split, those parking spots within each lot are just for that particular lot. What would be the shared parking? Why is parking an issue? Or whose lot it's in if it's shared parking? Can you clarify that, please?
But slightly, question a different way. Which of the 4 lots are underparked in isolation?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I don't believe any of the lots are underparked. I actually, might be a little concerned about underparking for what would potentially be Building 3. As you can see, there's probably, I don't know, about 10 or so parking stalls there, and depending on the use, they may need more. And so that may have to bleed over into the, at least a couple other lots.
Commissioner DePaul?
Yeah, Farhad, so approval now does not mean they can go ahead and proceed with development, right? We're just approving for this to be 4 lots, but they would have to submit a future development plan if they were to proceed with developing it.
Right, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner DePaul, this doesn't establish, the preliminary plat will not officially establish a 4-lot commercial subdivision. The purpose of the preliminary plat is just to make sure that this will work from the standpoint of things such as utilities, drainage, ingress, egress. It gives staff a comfort level for proceeding to a final plat subdivision, which will go straight to the town council and if approved, be recorded. And prior to that, prior going to town council, we will require that shared parking agreement, which will have to be recorded as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kovacevic?
So are those 2 rows of parking to the north, are those with Lot 2?
I'm assuming you're talking about these 2?
Well, no.
No?
That's, yeah, those, right there. Is that Lot
Correct.
2 or Lot 4?
This is Lot 2. And
Okay.
I apologize, I should have probably highlighted the proposed boundaries as well. But this is roughly the boundaries for Lot 2.
Well, there's 2 layers of parking. One layer didn't get turned off, so you're looking at 2 backgrounds.
Yeah. And
Go to this one.
That next page.
yeah, I was under the impression that a whole parking field was Lot 4, but Building 3 is definitely underparked. Lot 3, there's not enough parking there, and that's who needs the shared parking. Lot 2 may or may not be underparked. That's a, 2,000 square foot restaurant there? So that-
Potentially.
Yeah, so that's 20 spaces, right?
Yeah, it's also under.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, currently pad 2 of Building 2 is vacant. So it's just the southwest design. So currently, as it stands, the parking may be adequate, but if a new tenant were to move in anytime soon, especially if it were to be a restaurant, then there will certainly be more parking demand.
All right, okay, I've got the other one up here, but there's only 3, 6, there's only half a dozen spots to the south, and then there's another, there's 8 spots to the east of Lot 2, so they've only got 14 spots. Now, there's 2 handicap spots too. So 16 spots, and you've got, that building's 26,000 square feet, and it's got a restaurant in it. I don't think that's labeled correctly. I don't think that restaurant's 16.
No.
But, I stand by my earlier comments, that if I were doing this isn't the way I would do it. But lots 2 and 3 would get more of the parking, and because 4 and 1 are the ones that they can turn into quick cash.
Mr. Schlossberg?
So Commissioner Gray, I guess I should ask you, so it sounds like you know. So as far as it stands currently, there's one owner of this plat, and he's getting ready to combine these into four and sell them off separately, is that correct?
There was one owner, there's now two. So lot number 1 was sold off already. I don't know the fate of lot 4. It may also have been preemptively sold. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I actually checked, happened to check ownership this morning. And as of right now, what is proposed to be, well, the area proposed to be lot 2, 3, and 4 are under one ownership.
Okay. And then there's ingress and egress, 2 on La Montana, 2 on Palisades?
Correct, thank you for bringing that. Yeah,
Okay.
Two ingress egress points here on Palisades and one off of La Montana to the north.
Okay.
Commissioner Corey?
And I'm just noticing on lot, so lot 3 is actually, like we talked about earlier, it's getting a little bit bigger. And we know lot 2 and lot 4 are already established there, so I think it would be significant when they give us the parking agreement of where those, the parking agreement to see where any overflow from lot 3 would go. It looks like there's parking, but they'd kind of have to move over into that main area. But I think the significant thing here is that we demolished that building in between lot 1 and lot 2, right? You said that was a restaurant previously, and that's been flattened, and that's now that parking lot in the top section, correct?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Corey, the restaurant was here where Building 2 currently sits. There's 2 units here. There was the one on the right. The building that connected, I guess you'd say the structure that connected Building 1 and Building 2, I believe there was a mattress store.
Okay.
And a
Brooklyn
consignment.
And a consignment center, yeah.
Yes, okay.
But those are
I
now,
missed that consignment store.
yeah.
So, yeah, okay, so there was a building that connected them. So I think that dynamic has kind of changed the way that this is all laid out now. But I think some of the things here, is this going to impact traffic would be one of the things I would look at. And like Scott mentioned, there's ingress, egress on both sides. There's 2 on either side, right? Or is there 2 on La Montana and 2 on Palisades?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, there's
Or 1 on La Montana?
2 on Palisades and 1 on La Montana.
And that's not
And
one
that's
right
not-
there? Okay.
It is, yeah. Oh, I beg your pardon. I stand corrected.
Okay.
There is one on off of La Montana right here. Couldn't quite make out the lines there.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for clarifying
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So it looks like it wouldn't impact traffic too much, any congestion in that area, because they're pretty far away from that intersection, so that's good. And then, like, compatibility with the neighborhood, it seems to me like it's still compliant and compatible with the existing neighborhood, so that's not really a concern. And is there any major impact to local infrastructure? It doesn't seem like those are any issues there. So as long as it meets our land use, then I think that I would recommend approval and have them move forward with, going forward with their agreement, their parking agreement plan. Makes sense to me.
Commissioner Watts?
One more question about parking. At Building 2, or Pad 2, which is where that Asian Fang was originally, I believe, what's the requirement for parking for a restaurant, assuming that's going to stay a restaurant? Because that QSR, quick serve restaurant, looks like it's identified that to remain. Do they have sufficient parking now?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, if there were to be a restaurant back in where the Asian Fang was, if we look at Lot 2 alone, there may not be
That's what it looked
parking.
like.
I believe it's, I want to say 1 to 50 square feet. But hence the need for a shared parking agreement. But no, Lot 2 wouldn't be able to.
As a
accommodate
standalone, it
parking.
wouldn't be able, all right,
Right.
support it. Didn't look like it. Thank you.
So Farhad, I got to ask you, I'm with Commissioner Corey. in the most basic sense of interpretation, but then I also find myself probably a lot more in Commissioner Kovacevic's bucket because I wouldn't do it this way either. So my question to you is, yes, the underlying here is just a subdivision, it's just a zoning case, but it's also our downtown corridor, right? And if we perceive there to be a better way to do this that's more inviting, something that better serves that downtown corridor, how do you recommend we weigh that here as we deliberate this?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I would throw it back at you and ask what elements or what features.
Well, I just think the boxes are in the wrong spot, right? There's alternate ways to lay this out to where if lots 2, 3, and 4 are going to coexist with a shared parking arrangement, you can shuffle them, albeit maybe at the expense of building the building that's on lot 2, long term. But there's a way to shuffle them to improve the presence along Palisades and internalize that parking or put that parking towards the back of the parcel. That is just, in my opinion, would be a significant improvement on this. And you couldn't do that with the way these lots are currently laid out. So I assume Dutch Brothers got built on the basis that, yeah, there was enough generalized parking across lots 2, 3, and 4 to support it. So to me, that's still a fluid chess piece for the developer. But I go back to Commissioner Corey's perspective. As a zoning case, it's just a lot subdivision. It's neither here nor there, right? So Commissioner Kovacevic, he had it up first. Your mic.
And I'm not saying I disagree with Commissioner Corey or Chair Gray. It's just, is to my way of thinking, and I've been in this business, I don't understand all the parking going with Lot 4 when that's the piece that can be, that is most readily sold. And so it doesn't make sense to me. But as a zoning, like you were saying, as a zoning case, I mean, it's their property and it fits the zoning, it fits the plan of the town, but.
Yeah, but just because an RV storage can go there too, doesn't mean we should ever let an RV storage go there, right? Sometimes I think you gotta step out in the roadway a little bit and say, I don't know about this, take another look maybe, but Commissioner Watts?
Well, that's exactly why I was trying to find out the game plan. But I think you solve your problem for parking if you take lot 2 before you get to that diagonal and move it over. So you capture those that are on La Montana, and you take lot 3 and jag it over a little bit and pick up those that were on the side of lot 2 back over on 3. Then you've got all of these down below and those up in there for 2. You picked up some for 3, 4 stays as it is, and 1 doesn't lose any parking, it just gives up a little bit of ground. That make sense?
Sure, that's one option. I'd go a different route.
Okay.
If we're gonna pontificate the whole thing. I'd file for a variance on lot 4, let Dutch Brothers go with 6 spaces as a part of a shared parking agreement with the idea that if Dutch Brothers goes away in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, that parcel in and of itself can be self-parked in the future. And I'd retool lots 2 and 3 and the residual parking off of 4 to be highly functional versus maybe not.
I mean, what we're doing here is de facto CC zoning, which I'm on record in my opinion on that. It's just, the shared parking is, I mean, I don't like it, but, yeah, what it's worth.
Let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Paula, do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, Chair. One speaker, Lori Troller.
Going to plead the fifth on intelligence on this. So as a resident, if I go in and go to 3 and all those spots are taken and I park somewhere else, is there a chance my car's going to get towed with what we're talking about? I mean, it's not like it happens in town, right? But
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll try to answer Ms. Troller's question. If there were to be a shared parking agreement, validated, recorded, then no one should expect any parking tickets or towed vehicles or anything like that. And that's certainly something that we staff would make sure that we receive prior to even taking the final plat to council.
Paula, any more speaker cards?
No, Chair.
All right, commissioners, I think we probably deliberated this enough. Any final thoughts or?
Yeah, I do have 2 questions. Do we get another look at this for final?
Only if we continue it.
Mr.
okay.
Chairman, Commissioner Kovacevic, actually, so the preliminary plat will move forward to town council meeting next month, but the final plat, as it's written in the subdivision ordinance, will go directly to town council.
Okay. And next question, when you, assuming this gets approved and petitioner comes in to build Lot 3, are you going to do parking calcs to make sure that that they have enough, that there is enough parking to build on Lot 3?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, yes, we will look at what use is being proposed and also take a look at the existing businesses that have been established there. Look at those collectively and make sure that there's adequate parking.
If they build Lot 3 before Lot 2 gets leased, and they put a restaurant in Lot 3, I don't know that you have enough, that you're even close to enough parking for a 2 restaurants there.
Right, it's, for lack of a better phrase, it's basically first come, first serve.
Yeah.
If both buildings want to establish restaurants, then we want to make sure. I mean, a lot of it depends on the property manager or property owners. Making sure.
Okay. That's all for me.
Commissioner?
One last question about parking, I hope. When you do the calculations in your shared parking agreement, is the shared parking agreement taking into consideration the whole, all of the buildings and all of their required parking, so there's no duplicity in the parking spaces?
Correct.
Okay, so they can never exceed the sum of what all of them are required, but they can share the existing parking spaces?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And that calculation would also account for any dedicated spaces that are conveyed with a lease?
Correct, yes.
Commissioner?
I would make a motion, but I want to call out that I'm glad that Lori came up and talked about that shared parking. I think one of the important things is that we make sure it's really easy for people to park around here, and wherever they want to go, they think, hey, they might not know that there's different lots. They just know this is a parking lot and there's a bunch of different places around here. We want to make it easy for them to park wherever they really want to, and then they can visit the different businesses. So I think that's really important. The only time I would see like the dedicated signs for parking is if you're to-go food or something, or where you're right in front of that business getting a delivery or something. So I think that that's important. And I think sounds like there's some agreement here, and I would recommend approval on the preliminary plat for the 3 acres at NEC of Palisades Boulevard, La Montana, subdividing the 3 commercially zoned parcels into 4 lots, PRP 22-1.
Commissioners, a second. Paula? Oh, you're just getting ready, ramped up. Mr. Kovacevic? What are you guys doing with your mics on? Are you ready, sir?
I will second that motion, sir.
All right, so Commissioner Corey has made the motion to recommend approval to the town council. Commissioner DePaul has seconded that motion. Before we take a vote, I'd like to propose one amendment to it, and that's just that we also, within that recommendation, recommend that the council use their resources available to them to evaluate this as it relates to the plan, town plan, downtown corridor, and the overall character and feel of that, because I think as we talked about here, several of us see maybe a different way to do this. So once this thing gets in place, it's here for the next couple generations. So that would be my proposed amendment. I think we need to take a vote on an amendment also. It's more of a comment that goes with the motion, but I want to make sure it gets in the record that way.
Sure. If you are okay with us just doing that, Paula can make sure it's in that motion.
Okay. So it would be sure to get in front of council for at least a discussion point.
Sure. One of the staff report categories is the report from this commission, so that we put in that so the council will see that.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay, roll call vote.
Commissioner Corey?
Aye.
Commissioner DePaul?
Aye.
Commissioner Dempster?
Aye.
Commissioner Kovacevic?
Aye.
Commissioner Schlossberg?
Aye.
Vice Chair Watts?
Aye.
Chair Gray?
Aye.
7-0.
Thank you, Paula. Agenda item 6, public hearing and possible action on ordinance 2405 to amend section 5.13, community residences. Mr. Wesley.
Chairman, Commissioners, good evening. This is an item that's being brought back to you from your February meeting. At that time, we presented this text amendment in an effort to provide for additional inspections of community residences. There are some comments, suggestions for additional modifications that came from the P&Z Commission. The item wasn't noticed generally enough for that to happen, so we had to renotice and come back this evening. So that's what we're here for this evening. The council has requested the modification to increase the ability to provide inspections of community residences that come into the town. The current ordinance was approved back in May of 22, so about 2 years ago. And so this evening we have the original proposed modification, which is on this slide and the following slide. So with regard to the initial inspection, we let the applicants know that we can conduct any other inspections if we feel there's a concern that code requirements aren't being met. See, there's some noncompliance. And then adjusting the re-registration language a little bit to then provide for a little bit more detailed inspections that can occur with the re-inspection. Under the revised code, any new homes that come into town are required to have an annual renewal of their registration, which then kicks in this opportunity to inspect. Are there any questions about this piece? If not, we can go on into the changes that come from the discussion at the last meeting. The direction from the commission at that time was to address the language with regard to the business licenses. And so you can see the changes made here, owner and/or operator. That was what Commissioner or Vice Chair Watts was wanting to add, would be required to get the business license, taken out the if applicable there, and then down later under the registration piece, taken out if applicable. So making it clear that the business license is required for the operation.
Can we go back one slide, John? The right to, maybe it's 2 slides, the right to inspect seems a bit ambiguous. What are the conditions to inspect? Do they have to, certain thresholds, occupancy that excessive? Do we have anything that we can be more specific about, or was it intentionally left vague?
So, Vice Chair Watts, so the things we could inspect would be against the requirements of the ordinance. So we could pull up, if we needed to, section 5.13 and look at all of the criteria that had to be followed in order to have the home be legally registered. Those would be the things we could inspect for. As far as the statement here, yes, it was left somewhat vague, the reasonable belief. The concern being if we start trying to list specific things we could inspect for, something certain to come along that we didn't include in the list, and then we couldn't inspect for it. So anything within that list that causes a reasonable belief that there's noncompliance with that item would allow us then to inspect.
So code enforcement has to be aware of Chapter 5 to make sure they understand all the nuances in there. And then being vague, you've left it open if there are something that is not listed in there, but is still egregious enough, you still have the opportunity to go and conduct an inspection based upon something that's valid.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other item that came up, I'd noted this at one point, it kind of fallen off my radar, but as I went back after the last commission meeting and revisited the totality of the ordinance, I remembered that there was an error in the approval of the code back in 22. Brief history, as we brought this code to the P&Z Commission, one of the items of discussion was whether or not to allow for the waivers that are common in a lot of these codes. If these homes are, somebody's wanting to put them closer together or have more residents, there's an opportunity, a waiver provision. The commission took that waiver provision out and then amended the number of residents that could go in the homes. We got to council, they put the waiver provision back in, but I failed to note that in this waiver provision, it still used the old resident number. And so the proposal here is to change this so that we're consistent with the number of residents, because the code allows 6 residents, including staff, for a transitional home, 8 residents, including staff, for a family home. The ordinance says 10, and because that was based, again, on the old number of 10. So this will fix that so we don't have that conflict or confusion.
John, just for clarity and declaration purposes, in the discussion year and a half, 2 years ago, when we were going through all of this, we used the term reasonable accommodation because that had appeared, I don't know if that appeared in our code or appeared in a lot of the research from other municipalities. Is there any difference in definition between reasonable accommodation and waiver? Because just on the surface, waiver sounds softer and more inviting to me than reasonable accommodation might.
Chairman, the best I can recollect that series of events, in a lot of codes you probably see the full term waiver for reasonable accommodation or waiver of reasonable accommodation. And so that caused confusion, because isn't this already a waiver or creating a reasonable accommodation? We even put the code in here to allow it. And so having all that string of words caused confusion, and so the choice at that time was made just to use the term waiver.
But we would not administer that any differently than
No.
than the long form definition of it.
Correct. And so it still has, again, the criteria that are listed out in the code, and the committee that would meet to review information submitted to try to receive a waiver, and the whole process is all still there.
And then the second, I'll call it a minor tweak to this language, and maybe this isn't appropriate because it's not really on the agenda this way, but that last sentence where we say for the type of residence or reduce the separation for financial or therapeutic reasons, my concern is that that's almost inviting a pathway. Well, it is. It's doing that by design. With the waiver being in, it's saying you can request a waiver on these 2 terms. I'm not suggesting, although I would like to, I'm not suggesting that we take that out, given I know we have to provide a pathway, but I would like to add to the tail of that something to the effect of if self-governing, with the idea that when there is a case made for burden or therapy, it's typically in a self-governing model, or it's almost, it is, all the cases that I ever remember finding were a self-governing model. I don't want this to be interpreted in a way that says, my pro forma isn't working the way I want it to, and that's a financial burden, so I seek my waiver on that basis, and your code prescribes me the pathway to do that. I worry that that could be taken maybe a little bit out of context, not today, not tomorrow, but at some point in the future.
Chairman, I have to think through that a little bit more, but most of the homes we currently have, and I would expect to be in the future, are for senior residents. And they're not self-governed, and probably won't ever have that type of home be a self-governed model like I think you're considering with the sober living homes and the Oxford House model where they're self-governed. That's a very small percentage of what, in fact, we don't even have any now, and don't know if we ever will have any, but our full range of types of community residences we have need to have this waiver opportunity.
I get it, but it worries me a little bit. Let me think about it. Commissioner Watts?
John, help me understand. We had something in our recommendation to council. Council took it out and put their own verbiage in there. And where is it in the ordinance that talks about the 4 and the 2 and the 6 and the 4? Should we cite that here? So we have a point of reference so there's no ambiguity?
So that would be another option here in terms of wording. I could have said no more than allowed in the transitional residents of this many and no more in the community residents of that number, which is 8. But to simplify the language here, because it is in the definitions when you look at them, in case they change one place, we don't have to worry about changing in another place. This seemed to be the long-term cleaner way to do it. But that is the intent.
From a clarity standpoint, there's an awful lot of room on this slide to add that verbiage.
Sure, we could do that. If the commission
I'd
would
like to see
prefer.
that verbiage so it was clear
Okay.
and there was no confusion, because it sure heck confused me.
Okay.
I agree with that because I was confused too when I read the verbiage. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just had a question on the license. How do we coordinate and make sure that the state and the town that we have the licenses accounted for in both ends?
Chair, Commissioner Corey, the state looks for the town's approval before they will issue their license. And then as per the code, we can give our tentative approval for up to 90 days while they go through that state process to get their state license. And when they get that state license, they need to give us a copy. If they haven't within the 90 days,
Okay.
then we will let them know they need to give it to us or they need to move out because they're no longer approved.
Okay, thank you. And the waiver, so you mentioned the committee or the waiver committee, that who's part of that committee, or what business unit are they a part of?
So as set up in the code, it consists of 3 individuals: the chair of the P&Z Commission,
Okay,
the chair of the Board of Adjustment, and the Development Services Director.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Public hearing. Paul, any speaker cards?
Yes, Chair, 2. The first speaker is Larry Myers, and then on deck is Lori Troller.
Chair, Commissioners, I don't like this waiver language because in the ordinance, we specifically called it reasonable accommodation, and we used the definition of what reasonable accommodation was, and we beat it to death to get it to where it is. And the reasonable accommodation doesn't have, it has to do with many things, none of which is a waiver. It's a reasonable accommodation based on the committee hearing what the licensee wants to change of our ordinance for their accommodation, which doesn't include anything financial and must include the care, which is why we set the occupancy limits, because we lowered them so that there would be more care and from the past levels. And the second part of this is, I don't see anything in here, I don't see any penalties. What if you start operating without a business license and you get caught? Are you then allowed to operate? Oh, I tried to do it without a business license, and now you caught me, so I get a business license now with no ramifications? I thought that was talked about in the last meeting, and I don't see anything about that. And we may even have had a house open. And as far as what might happen in the future, Oxford House, no Oxford House, these people have already created, on the transitional side of things, they've already shown you that they will slide through any crack you provide. And we wrote a pretty good ordinance over years and much discussion amongst y'all, and then dragging the previous council like a dead horse across the finish line to the point where they changed part of this. And thankfully, John noticed what they changed, because it's a big deal what they pulled out. So I would like to see not the words waiver, because that does, to me, if you offer me a waiver, that gives me an invitation to get a waiver. If you tell me I have to have reasonable accommodation, then I got to go figure out what your definition is and bring it to you. Thank you very much.
I did a lot of research. What he said, let's start out with that. Whatever he said, he said. I did a lot of research on this. When it comes, I read, I don't know how many cases. The vernacular, the nomenclature typically used to make a change to a legal precedence, and you have an exception to it in the legal world, it's always reasonable accommodation. It's never... You'll never read in a court case that there was a what do we call it? What we're switching it to? So it's always reasonable accommodation. If you look in court cases, that's the vernacular. So that's just my 2 cents. So.
Chairman, there was a written submittal from Liz Gildersleeve, and her comment was that she supports, excuse me just for a moment, I read this. She supports the agenda item, but she says, however, addition of the follow-up inspections may be conducted upon a reasonable belief of noncompliance. This seems ambiguous. What triggers a reasonable belief, and who does the inspections?
In here, I thought you were going to give us a basketball score. All right, let's close the public hearing. Commissioners, final thoughts. I end up with 2. I do tend to agree with Lori there. I read waiver of reasonable accommodation so many times when we did this that I think we should extend that all the way back out. Leave the word waiver in, but of reasonable accommodation. And then obviously the correction of the maximum number of residents for the type of residence, but move the period there, which would eliminate the wording a reduced separation for financial or therapeutic reasons. I think that's leading a horse a little bit more than what I'm comfortable doing, but I'm fine with the rest of it as is, as long as that were to be omitted. And then, just so I can say it, I really don't see the reason to require a business license of the residences, but I'm not going to let my belief there stand in the way of the majority. So, Commissioner Watts.
John, I thought there was a penalty clause in the actual ordinance.
Yes, sir, there is.
I thought there was. So there is something out there that says if you don't follow the rules, here's the penalty, and it escalates.
Yeah, and the irony of that is that the penalty for registration is far higher than the penalty for not obtaining a business license, right?
I don't know that I'd have shared that.
I thought it was like $300 for no registration and $50 for a business license violation.
Yeah, Chair, yeah, in terms of the violations, I don't know how those business license and so forth, I have it in front of me. I think the registration fee for community residents is $350. A business license to register that, I believe, is $50. Penalties for not doing so go up from there. If I may, Chair, on a couple of items, one of which has already been brought up. I just highlighted in here the specific pieces of the code that we were changing. Everything else is staying the same, so I just didn't include it. It's here. We're really pretty focused. So if that caused some confusion, I'm sorry, but there is a whole violation and penalty section that's in here. On the waiver of reasonable accommodation, that's no problem changing that language. That's actually what we started with before, and it got reduced for whatever reasons I don't remember now. But there are a list of 5 items that have to be met. B is just one of those 5 items that you have to go through, and you have to meet all of them in order to receive the reasonable accommodation. Chair, I would disagree with your moving of the period, at least to some degree. I think separation, we need to keep, you could put it after separation if you want. If you want to take out the 4 financial or therapeutic reasons. Not to belabor this too much, but I believe that was wording you added previously when this code first came through for review.
I'm older now.
You're much wiser, I can see. But sure, we're glad to make any of those changes, to change the title from waiver to waiver of reasonable accommodation. That's no problem. We can make that going forward. I can put the exact language in here instead of the maximum number, put the full language in at this point. That's no problem, Commission.
One more.
Commissioner Watts.
I thought you were going to go. I think it does bring up an interesting point, though. $300 or $500 for a fine for an organization that thumbs their nose at following the rules seems pretty minimal.
So the fines start at $750.
I still think it's pretty minimal. I mean, they get $20,000, $30,000 a month per. So I think at some point, not tonight, I don't want to do that, but at some point, I'd like to look at those fines and the legitimacy of making them more aggressive than they currently are. So just a thought. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. John, just to clarify, so you were telling us that council asked to bring the reasonable accommodation waiver back on the ordinance.
But Chair, Commissioner, that wouldn't be quite correct. They asked us to insert the requirement for the inspections. As part of reviewing this, I recalled and remembered we had this little error here where that 10, a holdover from the original code, which still allowed 10, didn't get addressed in the final version. And so this is one I brought forward in order to make this consistent with the rest of the ordinance.
It was the inspection, okay. So, but you also mentioned that, but I'm sorry, but as far as the waiver and the reasonable accommodation part is concerned, they asked that get put back in here as well. Was there anything specifically part of that they were looking for?
So, Chairman, Commissioner Corey, so when I say that, I'm talking about 2 years ago when P&Z made their recommendation on an ordinance to council.
Yeah.
The P&Z Commission struck all the language with regard to the reasonable accommodation. At that time, when council considered it, they determined it needed to be in there and put it back in. So that was 2 years ago.
With no specific direction on exactly what they were looking for, just to bring what we had taken out back in.
No, there were changes that they made also, based on some of the comments that had been made at the commission level in order to satisfy some of the concerns with the language that the commission looked at, and making a final decision on what that waiver committee would be.
Okay, so are we hitting what they were looking for?
So yeah, it's all staying the same as what they recommended, what they approved 2 years ago. The only change in the whole waiver of reasonable accommodation being recommended is this one change in language to get rid of the 10, because that's no longer applicable, because we changed it to 6 and 8. That's all this is changing.
I see.
Otherwise, it's the ordinance as it exists today.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Commissioner Dempster, any comments before we go to a motion?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, all comments in. Looking for a motion. Commissioner Watts?
If I could remember everything that you said. I'd like to move forward and approve the motion as submitted with the recommendations to include, to modify the verbiage, as we discussed, and to include the numerical values for each of the types.
Okay. Commissioners, a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Watts has made a motion to approve with modifications as stipulated. Commissioner Kovacevic has seconded the motion. Paula, roll call, please.
Commissioner Corey,
Aye.
Commissioner DePauw,
Aye.
Commissioner Dempster,
Aye.
Commissioner Kovacevic,
Aye.
Commissioner Schlossberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Watts,
Aye.
Chair Gray,
Aye.
7-0.
Thank you, Paula. All right, number 7, review and discuss issues related to the provision of wireless communication facilities. This is not a public hearing, it's discussion, so we'll hear any public comment cards. Other than that, it's a chance for a sounding board with John based on the materials, all 333 pages of them presented. What sign part? In the full packet? So let's go ahead, let's do the public hearing, or not hearing, let's do the public comment cards first, and then we'll likely hear from Commissioner Watts.
Chair, there's 2 speakers. Lori Troller is the first speaker, and Larry Myers will be on deck.
Walk slow, Lori. Scott's pulling up the score real quick.
Who's playing? Sorry, who's playing? I'd probably get shot for asking that.
Purdue and UConn. 25 Purdue, 30 UConn. All right.
Does that get everybody
That did
in a
not
good
count
mood?
against your 3 minutes.
Okay, good. Okay, I was really hoping to hear what John had to say first, and all 300 pages he has, believe me, that was just like nothing.
Hold
I
on
know
one
all
second,
300
Lori.
pages.
Paula, we're going to tee her up for 6, right?
Okay. So I really would like to hear what John has to say before I start, but when I was getting ready for this meeting, I looked at the agenda and looked at the attachments, and I can kind of figure out where he's going to go. So based on that, I'm going to make some comments. I may need to recant them after I hear him speak. But the other thing is I did send everyone, you too, Susan, information. It was my bad. I was sending to each one of you thinking you all had a individual email address, and nobody got anything because I didn't send it to the one. I will send that. You're going to be getting a lot of stuff from me. I was sending it over time. It was released, and that didn't work out. So when I was looking at what John listed for this, at the bottom, there's towns, their name, Fargot, Tennessee, Davies, California, Malibu, California. I know those were included because I have been speaking to those in particular, unless he found another reason that they were special. And then included is Flagstaff, Sedona, Bisbee, Paradise Valley, Peoria, and Scottsdale. I will tell you that for the ones that are here in state, I've worked with most of those cities, helping them get rid of towers. They have a tower come in, it doesn't follow whatever code they have. People know that this is what I do, and they say, tell me, where in the code, where's this wrong, let's point this out. I'm just saying that if we're going that way, if we're following the Arizona suggested ordinances, which is I think what John's going to be saying, is I'm already fighting those towers, and we've gotten rid of, it's not that we've gotten rid of them, it's they're not being applied for properly. This is a huge problem. So these towns that he has listed as perhaps an example for us, they're looking for everybody knows we're going through this process, and everybody is waiting for this beautiful ordinance to come out because they want to correct theirs. And I'm telling you, I'm helping them with theirs. So the other thing I wanted to point out or mention is the map that John used in this meeting. The map before that, I think it was the February meeting, showed where Cox and Verizon already have underground fiber. I have concerns about that. I don't want to take up the time for that, but I want you to realize there's the two maps. Please look at the map. I think it's in the February one, because it shows more of the layout. I don't know why that wasn't included in this presentation, but he may have an explanation for that. So let me go with the assumption that John is continuing with a tower ordinance. And I'm gonna go with this. This is gonna be a little harsh. I'm sorry, but this is near and dear. I still don't see what the benefits are to require service to be underground, built underground. I'm concerned that Mr. Wesley is not aware of the town's liability in the situation of a lawsuit from a resident. It's not only the town's liability, but it's yours as well as individuals who may favor the construction of antennas. The town can't get insurance. It doesn't exist, which leaves the decision makers, you guys, vulnerable. Again, there are so many aspects to this, all of which are non-issues if the infrastructure built is underground. I continue to be confused by I continue to be confused why it's towers Mr. Wesley is pushing. It goes against our strategic plan. It devalues our properties. It pollutes our town with more emissions. It uses a tremendous amounts of energy. People don't really speak about that. It provides slower service than what would be provided if it were underground, and it is going to be disturbed by any storm or any dust storm, rainstorm or dust storm that we have. And the bigger fact is that we already exceed FCC limits in the town. So we're adding to it. We're not even thinking about it. We're just adding it. We're writing an ordinance to add to it instead of looking at what we have. So as a resident, if I get a tower in my yard, what do? I have to rely on the ordinance. I go to the ordinance, I take that to my lawyer. My lawyer and I go up against the industry and say, here's the law that protects my home. So if this ordinance is not strong, it's letting down every resident who may be affected by this. So again, it's the first line of defense for residents if we wake up and we have, folks in our yards building a tower. So it has to be extremely detailed. A lot of the failures of all these other towns, they say, oh, it has to meet aesthetics, and they stop at that. We need to define them. So there's other areas besides aesthetics that we need to be extremely definitive, and we can get into that with the electronics, and I'll do that at a later date. So again, our founding fathers left us with a clear vision for Fountain Hills and why there are only And why, when there's two choices to install this product, we're going with towers. I don't know why it's underground. Nobody's explained that to me. So I just ask that you table or continue to table this until you get your experts in. I had a video for you guys to see an example of what you can get from experts. I'll get that to you tonight, but thank you.
Chair, Commissioners, I'm going to stay away from the details of 5G and speak to a more broader issue of which 5G seems to be falling into the pattern of the government of this town. So I believe that we can all agree everywhere that the overriding objective of the town government should be transparency of information. I think we can agree on that. Careful research, guided towards listening and protecting the property values, the vision of the town, and the rights of the citizens. So, with that in mind, a majority of its citizens, not a vocal, loud, and mostly ignorant minority, and some of their ignorance comes from people that sit on the dais who, at one of the council meetings, waved around their cell phone. Because we're not talking about cell phones when we're talking about 5G, we're talking about broadband communications. So shame on her for doing that, and shame on the people who listened to her, because that was ignorant. So for transparency, the latest two examples, and I was suspicious of this in the last great debate over the Target redevelopment, a councilwoman directed some of the very documents requested by this commission to her personal email. I suspected those things were happening, and they came to light as the email and the documents were eventually came to the light of the public. And then we have, this is another great debate, definitely changing the shape of the town and the way it was intended by the founders. Staff is asked for documents, and commissioners have asked for documents, and staff has refused to give them. Under the guise of privileged material, I object. I'm a taxpayer, you're a taxpayer, we paid for that material, and that material belongs to us to use in our research. I suspect that there's probably some really good information in there that we deserve to hear, and you're not hearing it because it's being hidden from us, just like the documents that were sent to the private email in the last great debate we just had. And so I suggest you get those documents. They belong to the people. And that was an expert that we hired and paid a retainer. So I think, just give me like 30 seconds. There's more collective brain power in the body public on this particular issue. And I'm including some of you on the dais, than there will ever be inside the walls of the town hall of Fountain Hills. I'm sorry. They don't have the time nor the expertise to pull this off. And so I suggest you get the information from the town attorney by hook or crook, even if you have to go to the Attorney General to do it. And then see what that consultant has to say before you move anywhere forward on this issue, because it's of monumental consequence, not just for today. We're talking about forever. So thanks for the extra time.
Thanks. Paul, I know we had a couple come in electronically.
Yes, one of them, they're both in your packet. One was a lengthy email. The other one is from Liz Gildersleeve. And her comment is, in order to protect the town residents and neighbors, the ordinance must insist that the infrastructure goes underground, period. If the ordinance does not contain the underground verbiage, then I am not in favor. Putting the infrastructure underground is the most important aspect of this ordinance. That's all, Chair.
Commissioners, the other email came in this morning. Did everybody get a chance to see that? Who was the originator of the longer one this morning, Paula?
Miss Lori Troller.
No, I thought there was another one that we read. There was one at 9 or so this morning.
There was two from Liz Gildersleeve. One is Liz Gildersleeve commented on agenda item 7 and agenda item 6.
Who put the article in their email?
Lori Troller.
Was it Lori? Was it? I read it. I just don't remember it was from you. All right, let's close the public hearing. And I keep saying that, the public comment. Should we bring John up for a few questions?
Just a few.
Mr. Wesley? I'm going to start because I know you're going to be long and I don't want to be asleep by the time you're done. So, John, I just had a question on House Bill 2365, and this is just a procedural, the way my mind works versus the way legislative writing works, but it seems to me this should kind of work like a wedding cake, where the language that's in Title 11, which allows for the exclusion of towers in residential districts, is not included in Title 9, which is the area of the code that deals with cities and towns. Shouldn't it be reasonable to assume that it's in 11 and then it should then be available to the town to incorporate in their own local ordinances?
No.
That just seems so backwards to me.
No, they're totally independent. Title 11 of the state statutes regulates things for the county, unincorporated areas of counties. Title 9 are the rules and regulations for cities and towns to follow. And while they're very similar, and in some places identical, they are totally separate. And so if what's in 11 doesn't apply to cities and towns.
So this is 9?
That's at House Bill 2365. That's the one that was codified by the legislature.
Oh, okay. And then the second question I had was on the TCA of 96, Title I and Title II. Can you define what a notice of proposed rulemaking? That's a public comment window, right? That's not something that becomes ratified.
Chairman, yes, I can't go into too much detail because it's not an area I deal in too extensively. But yes, the FCC is looking at where broadband should be classified, whether it's Title I or Title II. They've had enough evidence come to them to decide that they need to look at it and possibly make a change. So they've put forth this notice of potential rulemaking, whatever that exact title is. And so sometime in the future, and estimates are it'll be fairly near future, they will close their comment period and make a decision on whether or not to move it. But it hasn't happened yet.
But the comment period was opened in
October.
To the 25th? Okay. Okay. Commissioner Watts?
Hard to know where to start. Hard to know where to start, but I turn my mic on, I get help. Yeah, the NPRM goes to a vote April 25th, and they've been fighting this, they being the public, since 2004, 2005, 2008, 10, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, and 23. So the odds of it passing shouldn't preclude us from being able to create an ordinance that protects the public. So I don't think the NPR is a given that is going to pass and become law in the immediate future, so consideration. But I also wanted to make a statement about the consultant's work. And this isn't to disparage the efforts of the town staff, but I don't believe that the town staff has the level of expertise necessary to do justice to the residents. And I think that the consultant that was engaged originally has that and continues to have it and continues to write recommendations for various towns across the country. So I'm frustrated that we mentioned consultants in even the information that you provide again. And for some reason, we're not allowed to have that information, even though the town residents paid for it, under some privilege of information, which makes no sense to me. If we pay for it, we should be able to see it, and we should be able to use it, and hopefully that the staff is able to benefit from it as well. So that's probably that's my first and second comments. And I want to, some of the things, geez, there's a laundry list, so I'm not sure if we want to go down your list, and then I can comment about those individually, or how you would like to proceed. And let me make one more statement before you do that. I think that the ordinance that you cited and provided provide some insight. All of them don't address all of the issues, but some of them address the underground component, some of them address compliance, some of them address output, some of them, each of them collectively, if we could consolidate all of those components, we might end up with a pretty good ordinance. So I commend staff, or you, whoever put it together, that those half a dozen citations were good, but not individually. Collectively, we weave them all together and we make a solid, good argument for protecting the public interest, public properties, and so on and so forth. So along the way, I'm going to do what you do. I'm open for comments, anywhere you want to go with it. Or I can keep going.
I don't think, you don't have a formal presentation of sorts today.
Right, that's correct. I'll make a very brief statement here, just kind of summarizing the start of the staff report. Over the last couple of meetings, comments and questions have been made, attempts made to define and clarify various points, and sometimes it seemed like they helped, and sometimes maybe I left being a little bit more confused than before, so I thought maybe it'd be helpful. I went back and listened to the two previous meetings, tried to pull out from those things different comments that were made and tried to clarify them. Hopefully I did. If I didn't, we can continue that discussion. That's what we're after, is trying to come to clarity here about where we're trying to go, what we can and can't do, so we can move forward in a reasonable and appropriate way for the town. I guess I will make one more comment, a little bit based on Ms. Troller's comments a moment ago. If we have an existing ordinance for towers and antennas, for the above-ground things that are here, if there isn't, I guess I keep getting the sense that that's fine, it is what it is, and we're really wanting to regulate something else. And so if we need to leave Chapter 17 alone and not change anything there, maybe that's the direction. And, maybe there's something else we should be doing besides that. Because that isn't an underground broadband ordinance, it's a towers and cells ordinance, towers and antennas ordinance, and that's what it's there for. So I'll just throw that out too, if we can get clarification on really what the goal is.
Yeah, I think you're probably right to go down that path, but I don't think it's that we should walk away from the antennas section either. I think that there's probably some complementary lens that we need to take between the two, which is going to complicate it, but I don't know if you can have one discussion anymore without the other.
And I would agree with that. I think that we don't have a big argument about cellular internet and what those are comprised of as much as it is the broadband component. So I think somehow we ought to be able to weave that into 17. I'm not sure exactly how, so I appreciate this opportunity to have the conversation about it. Continuing though, I think I want to address a couple of the things that were in the...
Before you get too far down your list, can you give us an update on last month's request to view that consultant's work and what the process might be to facilitate that, or I guess where it might be in process?
So, yes, Chairman, the town manager, and I believe with the assistance of the town attorney, have provided some comments to the town council and asked them for, direction on how they want to respond. And at this point, have not been given any direction to do anything different than what we've done at this point.
Is there a mechanism available? I guess we made our formal request for it, right?
Yes.
And town council heard that presumably in an executive session and abstained from direction to allow us access to that?
So, Chair, they didn't hold an executive session on it. Town manager, though, did communicate to the council.
Okay, so I guess at this point, we're waiting
Still
for
waiting.
council feedback and direction.
Yes.
Okay. Strange. I mean, there's probably nothing in there, but it's strange.
It almost makes me want to believe, because it is being kept secret, that that something was found in there, that we're emitting dangerous levels of something, and that's all I can come up with. I mean, why would it be
It's strange.
held up? I
Doesn't make a
don't
lot of
understand
sense.
it.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
We're not letting anything off of this desk go forward until we know concretely what happens there or why. If we can't see it, I need to know why. I'm sure there's nothing in there. But even I now wonder, why can't we see the document?
Yeah, Chairman Gray, I'm wondering, are we just to focus on land use and not get into, is this why they're keeping that from us, us seeing what the consultant reports are, or are there parameters that they want to keep us within, or?
Chairman, Commissioner DePaul, the town council received a work product from an attorney, and after reviewing it, for whatever reasons, determined that it didn't meet the needs of the town, and it's a work product, it's not a final product, and so they've chosen to keep it at that level.
Makes you want to know even more, doesn't it?
8,500. Well, then I want my tax money back.
Right.
Ready? So a couple of things that were in your presentation that isn't a presentation, but nonetheless. The NEPA requirement is only an initial requirement. It isn't a semi-annual requirement. When I get to another component, there is a semi-annual recommendation for confirmation of output from these towers or from whatever. And that has to be through a spectral analysis. It has to have the computers that hooked up to it, data loggers and so on, and it has to be calibrated. So that should be in the application process, and that should be something that the provider provides and pays for, because it just validates that their output is within a certain range. We've yet to establish the exact range, so we're good there. And just as an FYI, not only is the Environmental Protection Agency by way of NEPA involved, but also the ADA has requirements, so we want to include that to make sure we're compliant with ADA.
How is that relevant?
It's relevant to a side issue of of health. So we're talking about property values initially and what it can do to a neighborhood and diminish the property values, but there's also a health component if the proximity to some of these towers, if in fact we end up with towers and in lieu of putting it underground, produce inappropriate or the output is too high. Much like a Farad screen on a microwave. The reason that screen is there is to contain the microwave energy, and we want to make sure that we do that with towers as well.
Yeah, I agree. After reading everything I read, I'm kind of freaked out about what I didn't really think was a big issue before, but now I'm thinking, well, maybe it is an issue.
Well, it's much like mold. If you think about mold, even though the Earth's biomass is 25% mold, people have different tolerances to mold. And I think people have different tolerances to output that radio frequency, the electromagnetic component, that spectrum. So I think we need to be aware of it, because the towers at a height emit what's effectively a cloud. And it has a range, and we want to make sure that we're far enough away so that it doesn't impact people, public gathering places, schools, residences, and has that kind of an impact. So I want to make sure we consider that as well. I think some of the things that you've identified is the noise standards. Some of the good things are encouraging co-location, requiring security fencing, requiring landscaping, setting noise standards. I think we need to define noise, and I think I mentioned this last time. Noise can be electronic noise, much like fluorescent lights. If you drop a communication cable over an electric light, you can get transients. Transients hop on, and then they cause effectively static. So I think noise has to be defined. The structural certification is good. The property line and the heights, I think we've referred to Table 1 for that, and I think that has got some decent input on it. 300 feet from a residential zone property, I think is way too low. I think we need to consider between 1,000 and 1,500 feet. I certainly don't want a tower in front of my house, and I think at least 300 feet from the right-of-way. So I think we need to increase that.
On that one, based on education you've given me on this and the way that frequencies are emitted from these, do we also need to consider a vertical separation too, right? So if you've got a tower,
Right.
if you've got a tower here and you got a home here.
Exactly. Yeah, so you have to have that as well. And that, it has to be from that point. It's like line of sight again when we talk about community homes, corner-to-corner properties. So this has to have a point of origin, and the point of contact has to be that distance because of that effective cloud that is generated. Okay?
Chair, if I may, Vice Chair, on the comment you just made about the 300 feet, this isn't a finalized map yet. It's still in some process. But today, to put up a tower, it can't go in, or in order to go in residential or to go within 300 feet of residential, it requires the council to approve a special use permit. You're outside of that, then those are the only ones that could go in just administratively. So looking at this map, we can see, we can start up here. Any of this commercial area up here is all within 300 feet. In the town center area, we have some area in here that would be outside of that 300-foot where a tower could go without requiring a special use permit. By the time you get down here, there is a thin band, but we're already towers, and so there's a separation distance between towers that would cause it to have to go to council. When we get down to this area of industrial and commercial, again, there's some small area here that's outside that 300 feet that could potentially go in administratively, but because of the existing towers and the separation between towers, again, probably couldn't. This one's not really drawn correctly. It should just be the Fry's area itself. And so there may be a small point in the middle there where you could put a tower without going through council, and it'd be pretty small. And similarly up here, this was drawn wrong. It should just go around the lodging zone area. So again, maybe there's a small area right there that could get a tower with administratively. So those are the only areas currently with 300 feet where towers could go in administratively without going through a public hearing process. It's not going to take much of a change to get that, so you couldn't go any place in town without going through a special use permit. And that's certainly an option if that's the way the commission wants to go.
Well, these towers, though, if I'm not mistaken, are primarily cell towers, cell phone towers. Okay, they're not broadband. They're not emanating broadband frequencies. So there's a difference there. And again, we really have no control over where the cellular towers go. We would like to see them as far apart as possible, but still as close as possible for best coverage. So we're not trying to eliminate anything, just kind of manage it.
So if we are able to distinguish a tower, or more importantly, an antenna that is just emanating broadband, you're wanting to make that even further from residential.
Yes,
And so, again, 500, 1,000 feet.
yes.
So again, at that point, you might as well say they all require a special use permit, because there really wouldn't be anything left. You know, maybe a couple of very small areas.
The ideal situation, though, is to put it underground.
Right.
One of these, or I guess there's a couple of them, that the examples that you provided were very specific about putting all the broadband underground. If that's the route they went, and apparently they haven't been challenged on that. There is some cost, but that cost is burdened by the providers, not necessarily the
And
town.
which communities were those that did that?
I
don't
went
remember.
through them and I didn't write them down, but I know there were 2 or 3 in here that they specifically talked about being underground. So I think that would be the best solution if we could come up with that.
Look, I haven't seen that in the codes yet, so
Okay.
I missed it when I read that. No, it
So the 300 feet, I think we should look at that as with respect to broadband to 500 or 1,000 feet, whatever. And I think there was one in here that had 1,000 feet. And I'm assuming that you gave me examples that were not challenged in court. So I assume no, you don't know?
So, again, Chair, Vice Chair, the 3 or 4 outside of Arizona, as Ms. Troller mentioned, I got those because they were ones that had been mentioned at previous council meetings. And then the ones in Arizona were just random ones that I picked. As I said in the report, generally speaking, several of them are ones known to be a little bit more progressive in what they do. And then others just for some comparison. So no, I did not do any checking of their codes to see if that had any legal challenge.
The ones that I did, the ones in Hawaii, the ones in California. California is probably one of the most progressive states to protect their residents. For all the things that go on in California, this is a good thing that they did. And it's hard for me to say that, but it is. I think the drive-by test is flawed. I think that's where it comes back to using the spectral analysis when you have somebody that's certified in the operation of that to make sure that the output is recorded, then it's matched against the provider's data. The provider has specific data that says, here's my peak. It's kind of like a bell chart. And they know when their peak times are, what their drop calls are, what their, all of the details. They're very granular in the data. So we compare that to what their application says as far as their output range to make sure they're within output. And if they're asking for more, is it a matter of changing hardware? Is it a matter of adding additional hardware, or what is it? But we need some, we'll go back to that reasonable accommodation. We want to make sure we provide service, but we don't want to compromise anybody. So more to come on that. And if you need some guidance on where to acquire and which spectral analysis machine to provide, I've got it for you. The certification is a little bit different, and the calibration is really important, much like radar guns. So that's more to talk about that. The semi-annual certification, I just mentioned that. And the ongoing maintenance operation. And now I'm going to have to go through all of your pages. Each one of them has some notation on it. But I still want to talk about what you provided, I think is a good framework. If we can weave all of the components of each of the ordinances together, I think we can come up with a good solution. So I'm going to relinquish for a minute, and if anybody has any questions, please.
Commissioner?
Yeah, I want to go back to the underground, the broadband underground, and I guess, is the provider going to refuse service based on the cost? And is the caliche going to be a big deal here with trying to put some of this stuff underground and the legalities of, I mean, if we're creating the ordinance, then they have to follow it, and if they choose not to, then they just don't provide service here? Is that it?
Cox and the phone companies Cox and the phone company are already doing it. They're already pulling cable underground, and the technology is pulling it, not trenching it. Old technology is trench. Now you'll pull the cable underground, and it's probably much easier with a fiber optic cable than it is with some of these big coax cables.
Okay.
Still waiting for me, huh? I don't want it to be my show.
Commissioner Corey?
I do, just playing devil's advocate, which I usually do. Just hear me out. And I understand health and safety are a key primary focus here, and I completely agree with that. And I do wish we could see that report so we know that there aren't any issues. But one of the advantages to 5G broadband, as I understand it, like we talked about a couple meetings ago, is that it is wireless. So in my home right now, I have Cox Internet, and I gotta get a router, and I have to get a modem, and I gotta plug it into the wall, and wherever that outlet is, it's stuck right there. Whereas the 5G box that these providers can give me means I just plug it into the wall and go. If I move to another house, I keep my internet. If I wanna be mobile, I can keep my internet. Maybe I'm a business that has 5G and I'm doing something out in the avenue of the fountains or something, I can bring my 5G box with me, I believe. You just plug it in and it works. So when we think of like, I don't know, phones used to be on the wall. We had to turn the circle and call somebody, and now they're all wireless. Internet seems to be like it's heading in that direction too. So I think this 5G broadband is a new technology that people are probably gonna want. I think these 5G wireless internet boxes are pretty popular. I'd like to get one myself, and I can't because there's no service. But I remember in speaking with a couple people here, we want to try to bring this as close to getting the signal as close as possible without broadcasting it just throughout the entire community. So I think it was like the last mile was the plan, right? Try to get as much underground as they can, but ultimately, having the wireless is the benefit, because then you can just plug in and go. So that's kind of my devil's advocate to that system. If we are all 100% underground, then we got to go plug it into the cable and the modem and the router and everything. So that's just my feedback on that part. I think that people are going to look forward to having that in the town.
So, did I interrupt you?
Can we?
Is it Commissioner Dempster?
No, it was Larry.
Oh,
Larry, but his time
it sounded like Commissioner Dempster, so. I think you're mixing apples and oranges. Cellular communication, we're not talking about that at all. So 5G cellular, 5th generation cellular is that. It's just the newest technology, the newest box, the newest product. If you think about a spectrum, here's a radio frequency spectrum. And this part has 5G cellular, and this part has broadband. They're uniquely different. They talk different, they communicate different, they broadcast differently.
Yeah.
So you'll never lose your cellular. And I wouldn't be an advocate for that because I love my phone.
And I'm not referring to cellular.
But that's what it is. But broadband is huge amounts of data, so it requires huge amounts of energy and output and input. So you've got, it's not the same thing. So apples and oranges, I want to be sure we don't mix those.
Sure.
Because we're supporters, I'm a supporter of 5G cellular, 5G internet.
I have 5G cellular at my home. It works great. I don't have 5G broadband at my home. I'd like to get that.
He wants to mine cryptocurrency at Fountain Hills Park.
And I want to get online without having to plug it into the router.
That's not going to get you online. Broadband's not going to get you online the same way. Think about something that requires an enormous amount of data like the Waymo cars and the self-driving cars. That's huge. So there are certain areas that maybe a cell tower that was managed properly, had the right output, the right validation and calibrations would be appropriate in those areas. But the residential areas where you don't need it, and it can work off of the internet as it is today, 5th G, 10th G, whatever the latest generation is going to be, wouldn't be affected by it. Broadband is different, and it works on a different frequency.
I am aware of that, and I believe my point is still true unless Larry wants to come up and... Yeah, can he?
He can't, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Right now, off of the cell tower, it will be 3 times as fast as your Cox internet if you're buying the middle speed.
Yep.
And it's a box, you can plug it in anywhere you want to go, and that's your broadband. It's there now. It's on the big towers, and there's only
Larry, come up to the mic.
We still heard you, but
You
I
said
think for
one
everybody
sentence,
else.
Susan didn't hear you, so start over.
Okay,
please.
so you can get the Verizon Cube right now.
Yep.
300, the middle speed of Cox is about 100 down and 10 up for $100 a month. You can get the Verizon Cube for less than $100 a month. It's 300 down and about 30 to 50 up. That's very, very fast.
Not consistently. I've got it in my office.
It's not consistent?
Not that consistent.
Because
It's
I'm
not-
in a canyon and I tried that thing, it blazed every day. So I think it depends on your proximity to a tower.
And it's good.
But
I
all
got it
that
too, and
aside,
it wouldn't work, and I called them, and they said, I don't have the service.
Okay.
I don't have the wireless.
from the tower.
Yes.
But that cube's not gonna work off of these small wave towers. That's the point. That cube has nothing to do with small wave broadband. With regard to the speed that you wish to have and what Commissioner Watts was saying about self-driving cars and the like, in your house, there's only two reasons to have speed of that nature, bandwidth. Multiplayer gaming, which is players from all over the world playing a game. Massive amounts of data coming in, and your massive amount of data going out so that everybody plays the game in real time. And maybe if you're streaming 5 or 10 different movies to different devices in your house all at the same time. Otherwise, you couldn't possibly use the bandwidth, so there's no reason to put a tower in front of your house, stick a bunch of fiber that peds up at your street, and you'll have blazing internet without wireless. The only reason you need the wireless is if you want to play a multiplayer game sitting in the fountain park on your phone. You might need a small wave tower or a Waymo car is really about it. That's it. I'm
So
not gonna,
I would challenge you on one thing. You could have broadband at your house by way of a fiber optic cable. You would have a point of demarcation in your house, much like you have a router today. It would be different technology, and you would have wireless anywhere in that area. So you could create the same environment if you wanted to.
right,
You
in
got
your house.
In your house. Out in the environment, you might drop down to the 300 down and the 100 up.
Right.
So that's a possibility as
Right.
well. But fiber optics underground gets you still to your house if you want it, and it gets you that point of demarcation, and it gets you just like you have cellular today.
Right.
But you get broadband frequency instead.
Right.
And I'll bet you at some point in time, they'll combine some sort of a combiner, multiplier, broadband, internet, the whole 9 yards into one device, as opposed to having two different routers. But right now, you could do it with two routers.
Right.
Okay,
Right now. I have it in my house, 2 routers.
okay.
Broadband and cellular in my house because I'm in a canyon.
Okay.
And so I bought my little wireless tower in the house, bores a hole in the internet, private, to the tower, and that's how I make cell phone calls. Otherwise, I call you, my call drops. So,
And I'm in something of a canyon, but I've got T-Mobile instead of Verizon. And my T-Mobile is lightning fast. And I don't have any problems whatsoever. I've never had to
Okay.
reset the thing.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that. I was under the assumption that that was the 5G broadband, but it was clarified to me that that is the 5G wireless. So my last question would be then, who ultimately is the customer of the 5G broadband if it isn't residents?
Whoever wants to buy it. You know, it's businesses primarily, heavy data users. Yeah, they'll probably be buyers of it. But I don't think it's necessary in, I thought I was off again, necessary in a residential environment. Residential environments, I'm concerned about property values. Somebody sticks a tower in front, and the statistics tell you that you've got a 3 to 20% degradation in the value of your house. I'm concerned about health, although health is much more difficult to prove or validate because, it's like I said, with mold, some people are sensitive, some people are not sensitive. Asbestos is another one. So there's different levels of sensitivity when it comes to radio frequency and electromagnetics.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I'm not knowledgeable enough about it. I think that it would be interesting to know who is looking for this technology right now in the town.
I'll tell you that a lot of countries in Europe have outlawed it, the towers, because of health hazards. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because that's extremely difficult to prove. We can prove residential value degradation. That's the statistics that I got from the national retailers, or real estate. Can't remember the acronym for it, but that's provable. The health one is a concern, although we haven't been able to validate it yet, other than the ADA saying that there is a sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. So, but other than that, I think I've covered all of my points. I hope it helps a little bit, or at least things to consider.
We let Larry come back, we gotta let Lori come back.
Larry only had 3 minutes.
True.
So hard to limit it to one. You were talking about the build-out and funding. There are huge programs. I mean, there's huge. I was asking Dave if the town, Dave Pock, if we ever took advantage of, there's something called the Arizona Rural Broadband Development Grant. All of these are all grants that the town can take advantage of to build our own underground infrastructure. So that, you gotta look at that a little differently, because then we would have the liability of owning. I've never even introduced this thought before, but in 2019, the federal government imposed a tax on everyone for I don't know how many years, and that money came together, and I don't have the name of that. I don't like to speak without those facts, but there were funds, and it was literally to put broadband on copper wire underground in every town. It's to help bring broadband everywhere. So just like that, there's these other grants. There's the Arizona State Library Technology and Act grant. There's the Arizona Broadband Educational Incentive. There's the Broadband Equity Access and this is so small I can't read it. And Deployment Band. There's $43 million in that one. All of these are hugely funded. The Arizona Broadband Statewide Middle Mile Strategic Plan, the Arizona Statewide Broadband Strategic Plan. These are all multi-million-dollar funded grants that we could take advantage of and build this ourselves. So, Anthem, they're all underground, but they had the ease of plowing the whole place over, and then building up the community. So it was really easy to get it underground. But there is this option too. So I'd never pitched this before. That's a big deal. I don't know that that's something we can do, but there's that as well. And just so anybody listening and everybody here understands, broadband, everybody thinks they need it, but who can define it? What is it? It's just data really fast. So for the last 15 years, it was defined at 25 megabits per second down and 3 megabits per second up. It just changed last month to 100 down and I think 10 up. I don't know if it's 10 up or 30 up. But it just changed. Now, the FCC does that definition, but it was fine for the last 15 years. I don't know what anybody else is doing that now requires all this extra stuff. It's not me. And I work in the data industry, and I move a lot of data every day, a ton of data. So does my son. I can't say who he works for, but his requirements are enormous, and what the service we have is just fine. But that's the definition of broadband. It's just data at a minimum speed, and right now that's 100 up and 30, or sorry, 100 down, 30 up. If it doesn't meet that, it's not called broadband. It's just your data service. So I just want to make that distinction for people.
But to Lori's point, in order to push that much data, it requires a different part of the bandwidth. It requires more,
different
and I'll call it energy, because we have energy causes all of this data. The ones and O's move and push at a certain rate because of the energy we apply to it and the output from those towers.
Yeah, think of a pitcher throwing a ball.
Yeah,
I mean,
same thing.
Okay, so your concern, obviously, safety is your biggest concern, I'm guessing, from putting the broadband above ground versus below ground.
It is a factor. There's reasons you don't typically hear me discuss that. You rarely hear me discuss that. There's reasons for that. I will go to the hill on property values.
Okay.
As a whole, if every house has service and we don't have a single one of these towers, meanwhile, the rest of the valley, there's people getting affected by this, and people are going to start looking for areas like Anthem where there's no towers. You know what we just did for Fountain Hills by putting it underground? You just increased our property values tremendously, because we're going to be one of those few areas doesn't have excessive emissions. But I'm telling you right now, we already do. With all of this we have going on, this little map John has scares me. You got to understand, so I guess these are 300-foot circles. You got to understand, some of these towers are emitting 25 miles. I feel so bad for the homes that are so close to these, but there's so much I can get into. I don't, it's obviously not healthy, but I'm going to argue to the hilt on property values. We can actually increase the value of the entire town by not bringing towers in and by bringing it in underground. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
I got one parting comment, and this is just food for thought to ponder. Has anybody, I'm sure everybody here has read the terms and conditions of your cell phone service and your cell phone manufacturer, right? Everybody read all that? Oh, yeah. Okay.
$10 says you did.
$10, you're right. So, you know it has a warning in there about radio frequencies and keeping it 5 millimeters away from your body because of electromagnetic exposure? There's 2 warnings in there. And it talks, iPhones do it, Samsung, do it, all the phones do it. They all have warnings. So I think it's something to consider, but I do think that even though some of these towers that have cellular information are only 300 foot or 25 miles, the frequency on the bandwidth is the problem. It's the power. And when we talk about adding power, that's the problem. And when you get into the broadband areas to push so much data, the power of the output is so important to control it, to manage it, to validate it, and to control it within limits, and then minimize the amount of towers that you can have out there from residential areas. So with that, I'm done.
Well, is rate limiting power an option under the current state scheme?
Yeah, you can. Yes.
It would just, in theory, mean more towers.
Yeah. Yes, and then you get back to the property values, because now you're placing them everywhere. If you have more output, it has more range. If you have less output, you have more towers. So they're inversely proportional.
All right, let's move on to agenda items 8 and 9, commission discussion and summary of commission requests. John, anything for us? Anything for John?
Yes, guys, I have, and I had a few comments too, but I can send them via email to John about item 7. But I have something for John and for the commission to consider and look into. I got a call last week from an investor wanting to purchase one of my listings. And so this is a new craze, I guess, a new thing coming on with co-living. There is a new company called PAD Split, P-A-D Split, where these investors come in and buy homes, and they modify the living space into more bedrooms. So they may take a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home and turn it into a 5 or 6-bedroom and maybe add a bathroom, and then have individual leases for each bedroom and have cohabitants in each home. I found it very interesting, and if you go on their website, you can see an actual floor plan where they do this, and some of the rooms are so tiny, it's crazy. But I didn't have a chance to look at our definitions of households, and I mean, one, I think this could be an issue with parking, you know, if at the property, but I just thought this was very interesting as something new that's coming this way. They said if that didn't work with the house, that they worked with insurance companies and they would buy the house for insurance companies for families to temporarily live while work was being done in their house. And then they also worked with, they called it co-living, which is group homes, and he said flat out that we make so much more money because we can charge have an individual lease per room. So I just wanted to bring everybody's attention to this new option of pad splits. So John, I wanted to bring this to your attention.
Yeah, Susan, can you spell the PAD, P-A-D, can you spell the second word, please?
Split, S-P-L-I-T,
Thank you.
like that.
Are you in the market, Dan?
Yeah, Chairman,
It's
this
very
is something that's
interesting
very popular on the
website.
East Coast. New
Is it?
York is doing this all the time. I mean, it might be new here, but it's big on the East Coast.
Crash pads?
Yeah, there were several states that it seemed to be very popular.
Great. All right, thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we are adjourned.